Okay, I'm gonna get started. I'm Jennifer King. I'm with Eversweet Apiaries. That's a free honeybee education company in Kearneysville, about a half a mile away from the proposed Rockwool facility in Kearneysville. So obviously, you know, I've been an advocate for honeybees, our environment, and so that's what initially drew me into who is Rockwool. What do they do? You know, I was concerned about the adverse, you know, effects that it was going to have on the honeybees. But then the more I did the research and found out who Rockwool was, how did they get here, how our government snuck them in, then it was like, okay, you got me hooked. Now I see how much deeper this rabbit hole goes, and it's more, you know, it's a fight against our state and local government, and more so than just Rockwool. And we've seen plans in black and white in FOIAs that they have plans for a 1,000-acre industrial park in Jefferson County. So we are currently a attainment zone. We have very little pollution. We've never had to experience this before. We're not quite like the rest of West Virginia. And so they want to make the Eastern Panhandle, Jefferson County, the new Chemical Valley. So I have a lot to cram in. I have 10 months of happenings to cram into 10 minutes. So here we go. Rockwool is a Denmark-based company, and they like to greenwash all of their products. So they make mineral wool insulation, and they're going to emit over 155,000 tons of pollutants a year in Jefferson County, and their airshed is 35 miles. And so that's why Loudoun County, Virginia, has become concerned, and then also Frederick. Is it Frederick County or Frederick? Okay, yes. So everybody's perked up, like, what? Who? Oh no. They will be using 84 tons of coal per day, and also will be using natural gas. And Rockwool promises 150 jobs, gotta have jobs. That's the whole, you know, economic guise of all these companies. And we have discovered from online employee reviews, it's not steady work, it's dirty work. It's like every other factory job. Rockwool always claims to be a good neighbor, and amazing citizen research has been able to catch them in many lies, like everything that comes out of their mouth is lies. And they've used the same playbook around the world. They've been using it for the past like 20, 30 years. We use the best technology there is. No, they don't. Over here in Wales, it literally rains tufts of their product. They call them tufts. And it's their product raining down on Wales over there. There's another piece that's close up. That's how big reference there. And this is recent. This is like from like last year. So this is, you know, this is ridiculous and unacceptable. Now, they like to cover this up. This happened in 2009 in Croatia. Their story is very similar to our story. Their government slipped it in. They didn't know what was happening until it was too late. And then they protested a lot and angrily. And Rockwool likes to cover this up. And they've paid a lot of money to suppress this on the internet. You actually have to Google in Croatian to be able to do the research to find this. Wow. Yeah. There's more protesting, and Trent Ogilvie, who's one of the CEOs of Rockwool, he was on the radio. He was like, "We've never been met with this opposition before," meaning Jefferson County opposition. And it's like, well, maybe you should ask the Croatians about that. No, they did not want Rockwool there. There's more. They blocked bridges. They got downright angry, nasty. Rockwool's not only a threat to our air, but also a threat to our water supply, because our geology is karst system. So it's basically a big old sponge, and it likes to have sinkholes all the time. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the sinkholes that came from the property. And it just so happens that's where their permanent sediment pond is going. Nice. How in the heck are they going to pull that one off? But that's what they're going to do. I actually think they're going to poison our water quicker than our air. So when a karst system, all the chemicals and everything runs very quickly through the system, and we're going to get poisoned quick. And our DEP, apparently everything's fine. Everything's fine. And they had violations for that too, from the DEP, because they actually tried to mitigate those sinkholes themselves and not tell the DEP. And we also have an endangered species in Jefferson County called the Madison Cave isopod. And it's like this little briny little critter that lives down in the caves, and it's a federally endangered species. Nobody seems to care about that. Rockwool doesn't seem to care about that. Our county doesn't seem to care. DB doesn't care. Nobody cares. We've been saying this for months to them. Nobody's listening over there. Rockwool is building in one of the most marginalized areas in Jefferson County, and it's across the street from a school, less than a half a mile from elementary school, and within 3 miles of another elementary, middle, high school, and daycare. So, there's North Jefferson Elementary, there's Rockwool. Yeah.
Right across the highway.
So the World Health Organization says you cannot build, a school within 2 miles of a factory, but it's okay for Rockwool to build less than half a mile from elementary school. And we have no emergency plan for those children. None. Are we going to train? Are they going to train those little hands to put on gas masks when they have a chemical problem over here with all the nasty chemicals? No, they're not. And as a matter of fact, we've learned that their escape plan right there, they're trapped. They can't get out. Does our county care? No. Does our state care? No. Yeah, I'm pissed off. Sorry, I'm not mad at you all. Rockwool chose Jefferson Orchards for their site, and this was an historic orchard and been operating for more than 50 years, and they destroyed 130 acres of apple trees for their factory. So they destroyed a human food source and bees food source, pollinators food source. I mean, like, can this company get any worse? They're terrible. Rockwool was a covert and cohort state-directed project coming down from the West Virginia Infrastructure Jobs and Development Council down to the Jefferson County Development Authority. There were other many agencies involved, the Department of Environmental Protection, State Historic Preservation Office, the Public Service Commission. This was a colluded effort, and they colluded in plain sight. Because the IJDC, the PSC sits on their council, the DEP sits in their council, and they all do it in plain sight, and it's under the whole guise of an economic development. You need jobs, right? Jobs. Jefferson County has the second lowest unemployment rate in the state. We don't need their jobs, and we don't need their dirty jobs. So that trick's not gonna work on us. Non-disclosure agreements were signed. There was many executive session conversations. They hide behind economic exemption, so we can't even FOIA them to get this stuff. They had a code name, Project Shuttle, that was used to refer to their project in their meeting minutes. So it's kind of like Amazon, but way worse. Way worse. And they won't go away. The public was excluded from this process, and it would have been extremely difficult even for the most civic-minded citizen to know what was happening and put the pieces together, because they used the project name Shuttle, in their meeting minutes. So, oh, they're talking about a bus system? Oh, that must be great. No, it's terrible. So our voice was stolen, and it continues to get stolen. It continues to get suppressed. So originally Rockwool would have been receiving over $37 million through interest-free and forgivable loans from water and sewer infrastructure. They get $200 a head from the workforce grant. They're getting money from the Department of Highways and from the county. The payment in lieu of taxes, tax break, they don't have to pay taxes, county taxes for 10 years. We're getting paid, we have to pay to get poisoned here. And this is how they set up shop. They get this similar deals from around the world, and this is how they're able to spread like a virus, because they get a red carpet rolled out. And I didn't even know what these economic incentives were up until, all this happened. And apparently these economic incentives, this has been going on since like the 90s. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible business model. Right. A small business person can't get that same deal, and it's not fair to the citizen. Oh my God, I got 2 minutes? Holy crap. No.
Well, we'll have more time for discussion too.
Okay. Oh, I do? Okay. So well, we have some wins. We did get rid of the JCDA members, the Jefferson County Development Authority. They resigned, and then hopefully we're going to replace them with better individuals. The executive director, you know, he found another job. Don't let the door hit you. Elections, we voted out, you know, some pro-Rockwool officials voted in some good anti-Rockwool. The water funding, we gave them such a battle, they gave up, so they paid for their own water themselves. Okay, great, we didn't want you to have any water, but if you're gonna have it, pay for it yourself. And we only can hope, you know, that IJDC is gonna give this money to Southern West Virginia, because Southern West Virginia doesn't have water. So we have a council that is giving a company that we don't want corporate welfare, while Southern West Virginia doesn't even have water and clean water. This is criminal. So losses, we did lose the $16 million sewer bond. We fought that for 9 months, continually brought new information. We found in voice to the Charlestown Council, mostly fell on deaf ears. Some people listened. Their subordinate board, Charlestown Utility Board, CTUB, was not being transparent with council. And the CTUB is over capacity with their waste treatment plant, and they're literally dumping waste, untreated waste, onto the ground because they cannot handle their crap. And they've received DEP violations for it. So this goes into the Shenandoah, then it goes into the Potomac, it's going into the Chesapeake. Everybody needs to care about this. And we have water people organizations that have determined, yes, this Evetts run is a problem. Their labs are EPA approved to do these samples, so they know what they're talking about. Charlestown would not seek new counsel, legal counsel. Their legal counsel was representing all parties involved. Severe conflicts of interest. They were talking with Rockwool attorneys, they were talking with everybody. They were representing the Charlestown Utility Board. It was terrible. Okay, so I'm probably gonna pause here. And maybe if we get a chance, we'll come back to the gas. Because this is about the gas, right? So.
Right. Well, shall we all go up and hear the rest of the presentations, and then we have time for discussion. We're going to what time? 11:50. So
About an hour.
we have another 40 minutes.
Okay.
Well, an hour. Is it 10:50 now?
Yeah.
So if it's going 11:50.
Oh, okay. So we have an hour. So we have a lot of time.
Okay. I mean, I can go run through this. I don't have that much more.
Oh, okay.
Why don't we
And,
let her finish?
Yeah,
And then we can
that'd
just,
be good. Then we
I
can
really,
have-
yeah,
then we can
I
have
got the
discussion.
action, I got a little bit about
Yeah.
the cemetery, and
Right,
then,
yep.
and I'm on a roll, so.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I really don't have that much to tell you about the gas because we lost severely on the gas. It is West Virginia, I don't know what to tell you guys.
I can talk about it from the other side,
Right.
from the Maryland
Tell
side.
me more, you know. But yes, we lost the pipeline. And it was wanted in the county years ago. They just needed Rockwool as an excuse to bring it in. We've gone back and looked through meeting minutes, FOIAs, and all this stuff. This was planned. These guys knew it was coming down the pike a long time ago. And so Austin Caperton, who happens to be one of the resource barons, coal barons, he is the secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection. He overrode the whole DEP to give Mountaineer their permit. We were denied a public hearing. Now we know West Virginia's gonna screw us, because it always does. But we were denied a moment to go on the record to say, we told you so, you know, this stuff's supposed to born sideways, we didn't want this. We got denied that. So again, our voice got stolen again. So, and I've yet to see any historic or endangered species assessments that was done on this pipeline. Again, we have endangered species. I don't see it, we're gonna have to FOIA it and see what we can get. So they've just been totally running roughshod all over this. They're building as fast as they can, so we can't stop them. And you know what happens when they build this stuff as fast as they can. It's gonna come back and hurt somebody later. So lessons learned, Again, you know, we've never had to really deal with this in Jefferson County, so we got really blindsided with all of this. Never really had to experience anything like this. Watch your development authorities. This is how they're gonna come in. The development authorities want these guys to come in, so you're gonna have to watch their meeting minutes. Unfortunately, most of the meeting minutes are garbage, so then you'd have to attend the meetings. If they're like our development authorities, they don't record their stuff, so that's another thing that we're going to try to make these agencies record their meetings, of course, not the executive session part. And that's probably what they'll start doing, is just having everything in executive session, the whole meeting. Watch your zoning boards and planning commissions, because after they get done bringing them in, then these other guys are gonna flip the script and change whatever zoning to accommodate that company. And that's exactly what happened to us. Branson had smart code zoning, and they just, whoop, okay, heavy industry, come on in. And we don't think that they did that properly, and so we're still going to like court for them for that. Know what your local paper of record is. Keep an eye on that. I don't know if every state has to put notices out the same way.
It's probably different.
It's probably a little bit different state to state, but I do believe that there's still process for notices. Again, they'll try to slip things in, small print, you know, so you can't see it. On our occasion, our air permit or Rockwool's air permit was put in the day before Thanksgiving, and it was like this big. So you want to form networks and partnerships with other organizations. You don't want to recreate the wheel, you know, and it's great support, learning. This is been my first rodeo. You know, I've been somewhat of an activist, but not on this level. And you want to have constant communication and coordination between these organizations, because again, you don't want redundant efforts. You want to make sure that you're all focused. We've missed a lot of opportunities on some things too, just because I say for once we were like chickens with our heads cut off, just kind of running around in circles, still kind of like in shock, like how did this happen? How did this happen? Future projects that are going to be needed, that we're going to be working on. We're shifting gears now. It looks like Rockwool's coming, and they're building. They're going vertical. They've got their permit. They've got their sewer. Now they're getting their gas. So prevention's kind of probably done with, and now we're going to have to go into protection mode. And rural agriculture defenders. You guys, some of you came to the House Symposium a couple weeks ago, and that was hosted or sponsored, and that was a great symposium, and that gave our community, you know, scientific, non-biased information about pollution and how to protect yourself. So what we want to do is start doing water testing, so we need, you know, base samples before, because you know they're going to poison us. So, and then we want our air monitors out. And so we're going into protection mode. Okay, so Boyd Carter Cemetery. Like this size, how can this story get any worse, right? There is a African American cemetery right beside of Rockwool. It's in the middle, it was in the crosshairs of Mountaineer Gas and Rockwool. I had known about it for years. We had hives in Jefferson Orchard. I'd known about it, but not many people knew about it because it's really tucked in, kind of out of the way. Again, it's on Smith Lane, directly beside of Rockwool and Carneysville. And there's 78 known burials, and we're discovering more possible unmarked burials from death certificate research. And there are many veterans buried there as well from several conflicts. And we have historical documentation to support the cemetery and the surrounding area was also a slave burial ground. We've sent all this information to our State Historic Society, by the way. They already knew about this. They've known about the cemetery for decades. They gave Rockwool the green light to build, so they knew about this cemetery. It was there. So from the FOIA research, we've discovered that Rockwool wants to use Granny Smith as their fire access road, and that they're going to have to widen it because it's just like this little narrow dirt gravel road. They're going to have to widen it, you know, big enough for trucks. And so that's going to cut 7 to 13 feet into the road in different spots. There's many unmarked graves and marked graves right beside the road. And so what are they gonna do with those bodies? We don't know. They have not talked to, the descendants are being legally represented, but they have not, no conversations have happened with the lawyers or with the descendants about what do they want to do with these bodies. And then, so that's the road, that's the cemetery right there. And then you can see right there, that's where they're cutting in a little bit there. And here's the kicker. They don't have to go that way. They can go out other access routes. So why aren't they gonna do that? There are boundary discrepancies with Mountaineer Gas's maps, and we've begged and pleaded SHPO, DP, the Department of Environmental, I'm speaking in acronyms, I'm sorry, because I realized that these are state acronyms, the State Historic Preservation Office and the Department of Environmental Protection. We've begged them to halt this construction because these boundary discrepancies are real, and how are you gonna have construction setbacks if your boundaries are wrong? And then we've also said this is slave burial ground. We've seen a deed that says that there's burials along the property. They don't care, nobody's listening. Mountaineers started trenching the pipeline around the cemetery last week, and they're done. They trenched it, laid it, covered it back up all in one day. From Watchdog Reports, Tracy Cannon with the Eastern Panhandle Protectors, she's been camping out there going on more than 20 days now. And like, people like her are very important because they monitor these pipelines and watch for violations and all of that. And in our particular case, we needed somebody there to watch the digging and maybe look for bones. The only problem is we couldn't be on their property, so we could only see, like, I don't know, it's probably maybe 20 feet away. And they're not gonna be white bones, you know, they're gonna be decayed, dark, so we're really not sure. There was no archaeologist, Tracy said, that was on staff there, no inspector, whatever, they didn't care. So here is the area right there. Let me get a close up. See, this is the deed right here, the original deed. If you've got eyes in your head, you can see the difference there of how much they've cut off of that back cemetery back there. But wait, it gets worse. Because right here is the only place they're stay off of. There's bodies all back in here. So, and there's bodies all back in there too. Ugh, makes me mad. I had a run-in with the cops this Tuesday too over the cemetery, so I'm still heated about it. They came in, threw this fence up, didn't ask anybody to throw this fence up, didn't talk to the attorneys about it, and they put this fence up only because I caught somebody backing up all the way, truck all the way onto the cemetery, turn around. You see this road, there's nowhere to turn around. So he was backing up, instead of backing all the way up, he decided he was gonna back up on the cemetery. No, you're not, no. Well, I was running up the lane, stop. And by that time, he'd already came down, and I was like, you can't do that. I was like, I'm here. And then they put the fence up there. And I'm sure they're gonna say it was for the cemetery's own good, so workers would stop backing up in there, but they still didn't ask permission to do this. And there's unmarked graves. We had ground penetrating radar performed on that spot right there. And there's unmarked graves right in there. So there, see, you can get a better visual there. That's their stakes that they've come in and just claimed. I claim the Rockwool land in here. Didn't ask for permission to put these stakes up or anything. And you can see how close they are to the graves there. That's a good reference right there, you know, the $5 bill in relation to the grave and the unmarked fence. Oh, I'm getting there. Rockwool trespassed on the cemetery. They did receive a no trespassing letter not to, you know, come on to the cemetery. They did it anyway. We have trail cams out there.
She's literally standing on a grave right there.
Yeah, she was standing on a grave right there. Yeah. More property markers that they've stuck in there. It looks like they removed a tree here. This is what really set me off last Tuesday. They've knocked trees over onto the cemetery. They just made a widowmaker there for that tree right there to knock into the cemetery. So old cemeteries are in danger everywhere by economic development, but it's more common with African American cemeteries. Often old African American cemeteries' history and culture are misunderstood, and the cemeteries are considered abandoned. Trees, yucca plants, and other vegetation were used as burial markers. Often broken pottery and other items and gifts were offered on these graves. So there are many living descendants who care about this cemetery and are fighting to protect it. New trustees have been formed. The trustees are seeking a stronger legal team right now. Like I said, they are being represented, but they need something more, and who can guide them through the next steps. So for more information on that, up-to-date information about all of the activities, you can visit there. If you have help information, we'd like to hear about it. We need all the help and support that we can get right now for the cemetery and the descendants. So. That was a lot. Okay, so, do I stay up here or we're coming up here?
No, let's all come up and,
Do you mind if I turn this off so that it's not blinding?
sure, what?
Yeah, actually, you just take my thing out now.
Yeah, we need to.
That makes
Since
sense.
Yeah, I'm not a skinny person either, so.
Okay, shall we introduce ourselves and decide who's going next?
Well, y'all can just go ahead and do all the talking now. I've done my thing.
No, I hope we can have a dialogue. I mean, I have so many questions to ask you, and so many things similar to what's going on in Maryland. But I'm Ruth Alice White with the Maryland Sierra Club Beyond Gas Committee, and Leonard and Omega, want to introduce yourselves?
My name is Omega Wilson with the West End Revitalization Association in Mebane, North Carolina, Alamance, and Orange County.
I'm Len, excuse me, I'm Len Zuza. I live in southern Maryland. I live close to the Dominion liquefaction facility near Cove Point.
Who wants to go next? Would you like to go?
Yeah, I can go, okay. Our organization, the West End Revitalization Association, was started 25 years ago in Mebane, North Carolina. And one of the major issues we were concerned about and dealt with was displacement of homes, cemeteries, African American churches that date all the way back into slavery. And the cemetery is over 200 years old. That's where the slaves were buried during slavery time. People are still being buried there, so it's not lost. It's very clear and visible. The core part of it that I'll talk about has to do with infrastructure. I served as a member of the National Environmental Advisory Council for EPA under Charles Lee, who's here, by the way. He's a senior EPA, EJ administrator for EPA at our headquarters in Washington, D.C. But our concern had to do with the displacement of dozens of homes, churches, more than one, and the cemetery that I just mentioned, for communities that did not have safe drinking water, paved streets, or sewer services, right? That was an infrastructure issue. We filed a federal complaint in 1999 to get involved in the process of why you were building a 8-lane corridor interstate highway through 2 African American communities that have been there since slavery ended, 1865. How that was happening and people didn't know about it. I was asked to be a part of the Goods Movement work group for EPA that dealt with 4 major pieces of infrastructure that impacted people of color communities throughout the country. They included highway corridors, marine corridors, i.e. ocean marine, major river marine, airport corridors, and railroad corridors. In our case, we have 3 of those in our community. The rail corridor, we can see it out of our window. That's my wife right there. Right? We can see the railroad corridor right outside our window. The highway corridor, part of it is also right outside of our window. There's 2 of them. and the building of a new one, which is an interstate highway, 27 miles to Danville, Virginia, one of the longest new corridors, basically virgin territory in the western part of the whole United States. Okay. We have recently added to that list the pipeline corridor, because this is an infrastructure corridor too. It has a right of way, and it also transverses waterways, streams, wetlands. In this case, the pipeline that is designed to come through Alamance County, not far from where we live, is called MVP, Mountain Valley Pipeline. It comes out of West Virginia, down to the middle of North Carolina, to Rockingham County and Alamance County, where we live. And it'll cross the interstate highway, by the way. And it'll come close to the church where my wife is deaconess, Milford United Church of Christ, that already has a pipeline within 20 feet of the building we put there 30 years ago. Okay. So infrastructure is a key issue of what we deal with, is how infrastructure is placed, because normally when infrastructure is placed, it's zoned like a building. It may be upgraded, but almost never does a change in modern times in history. Even old English roads and Irish roads that were made by cattle being marched created the path for where current roads are actually built, which is ironic. A lot of people don't even aware of that. Where people herded cattle, made a walking path that was visible. It became highways. And in the state, in our community, the drag trails where Native Americans lived for thousands of years actually became the streets and the roads in the interstate corridors right in the county and through the state of North Carolina. So they don't change once they're there. So what we're trying to get people to understand is the corridor problem and how it impacts dramatically waterways, air quality, etc. Because all of these issues is just not a matter of the impact after they're built. It's the impact while they're being built. Because there's air pollution issues with old equipment that would not, the diesel emission equipment, the diesel construction equipment, bulldozers, etc., to do the plowing and the digging. On the EPA guidelines, they wouldn't be allowed on the street because they don't meet air quality standards, but they can be used off the street for construction. All right, so we got that issue. Of course, the waterway issues is another kind of thing where wetlands that are used to absorb water for floods, heavy rains, etc., very often are just forgotten about, or very often in our case, we have them when we know where they are. For some reason, the engineers, they don't know they exist. Or the county officials that grew up in the area, when they become elected officials, just all of a sudden they forget that they permit things in these areas that have been there ever since before they were born, and create all other kinds of flooding, other kinds of problems. But the infrastructure impact is something that has legal guidelines based on NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, where you can file complaints on the civil rights laws and Title VI laws and environmental protection laws. The highway corridor that was going to affect us and tear our house down in 3 churches, we filed an administrative complaint in 1999, and we got it detoured around the part of the western community. We saved dozens of houses, we saved the cemetery, we saved 2 churches, we lost one that was actually built in 1893. And we saved some other properties by filing a complaint. It took many years to do it. Put the highway on moratorium. The original cost of construction was $22 million when we started. When they started construction in 1999, we filed a moratorium, the complaint. Federal government put it on moratorium, United States Department of Justice. And when they started building it, it had gone from $22 million for a 4-mile area to $250 million in cost. The extra cost, because we filed a complaint, they could have used it to mitigate the problem in the first place. The local government, federal government, county government officials did not want to mitigate the problem based on what we said because we were black. They didn't want to sit down at the table with people of color and negotiated because they said it would be used as a model for the whole southern part of the United States. If you did this for this particular small black group, and we're very small, then other people will want the exact same thing, right? But in any case, we've been encouraging the leaders relative to the pipeline issue, the Mountain Valley Pipeline. There's another pipeline, ACP, Atlantic Coast Pipeline in North Carolina. It also affects tribal communities, historic tribal communities, low-income white communities, farm property. Mountain Valley does the same thing in the central part of the state. The leading organization doing the promotion and the paperwork, and I got articles, someone came out in the newspaper yesterday. The Sahara Club for the state of North Carolina is a leading organization, along with the Hall River Assembly, which is a riverkeeper organization that our group is a environmental justice advisor for and have been for several years. We've been encouraging to put in forefront of the public information of the impact to African American churches and cemeteries. They have not been doing that in print, right? We've been saying it in meetings, but I have several articles. They have not been doing it. It hasn't been appearing in the newspaper. And also to file administrative complaints. They have not been doing that. Because a lot of our community people rather than protest at public hearings, city council meetings, county commissioners meetings, than actually file legal complaints because they're afraid of the blowback. Because when we file a complaint to stop the highway from coming to our community, we got death threats. So a lot of our very good friends just do not want to go that level that we did in 1999 all the way to the United States Department of Justice. So I'm putting that on the table to say that there has to be some other ways to address some of these issues at the highest level of the law, because corridors have to be permitted, approved at the state, local, federal level. We already have some cities who come out in the county who come out 100% unanimously do not want the pipeline. We have the University Elon, which is a private university, very private, very expensive. They have a Sierra group that started among students, and they have 300 signatures where they're coming out against the pipeline. The pipeline is six miles from the university. But there are people who are slowly getting the message, but signing petitions won't get it. Placards won't get it. Marching in the street won't get it. You have to do some other things that are much, much stronger. And even though a lot of people want to be advocates, strong advocates, they don't want to be activists based on what the law says they should do. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's something we can talk about later, is what different modes we're using. These stories are hard to read.
Depressing, it's a lot depressing.
I'd like to make two preliminary comments before I actually give my talk.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson, Ms. King, I'd like to expand a little bit on what Jacoby Wilson said about the way we treat children is indicative of the quality of our society. I think the second point is just as valid, and that's the way we treat our dead is also important in being respectful of how we deal with them and treat them. And both of you have brought that out very clearly and very effectively. The second thing is I find it mildly depressing to give this presentation simply because I can take your talk, Jennifer, change Mountaineer to Dominion, change the geographic area from West Virginia to Southern Maryland. I could say ditto, except for the cemetery. As far as I know, no cemeteries are being disturbed in Southern Maryland. But the process is exactly the same.
You have a park where children play right across the street.
Two parks. It's a park and a swimming pool. And so while we're not disturbing the dead, we're aggravating the living. I did take the time to put a talk together, and I will go through it only in the hopes that it may provide you some new ideas on what you might want to do. And that is that in the early 2010s, Dominion Energy flew under the public awareness radar by quietly contacting regulators and public elected officials to obtain their support for building a $3.8 billion methane liquefaction facility in Southern Maryland, where they would be converting natural gas, methane, to generate 6 million tons of LNG for export to China and to Japan and India. During this very quiet lobbying process, regulators reported on the high volume of air pollution that Dominion would be emitting and began talking with Dominion to manage these pollution levels. What levels of pollution are we talking about? Jennifer, you're a bit of a piker in that we've got 2 million tons of carbon dioxide, 432,000 tons of mixed pollutants, 300 tons of particulate matter, and 51 tons of volatile organic compounds that regulators say are going to be emitted here. When I say that the regulators were talking with Dominion to manage the pollution, one should not misread that to mean that they're going to be reducing pollution. Because part of their idea of managing pollution is that Dominion was going to be emitting higher levels of pollutants than they would have normally been permitted. But what the state regulators did is said, we are doing monitoring and tracking on a regional level. So they took 2 companies from northern Maryland that were going to be shutting down, took the amount of pollution that they were going to be emitting. Dominion paid those companies to allow them to emit that much more in the Cove Point area. So I don't see that as reducing pollution. It's simply transferring it from one place to another, and I find that particularly repugnant. By 2014, residents of southern Maryland became aware that the regulatory process to approve the facility was well along and that they had been co-opted by Dominion's lobbying. They also found that they were unable to block Dominion's request for several reasons. Number one, Dominion had already gotten to key decision makers by persuading them that their request was not for a new facility, quote unquote new, but rather an extension of an existing facility. That meant, the regulators argued, that there was no need for a substantial report, environmental report, or an environmental impact statement, health impact assessment, or quantitative risk assessment. There was no need for that because that had already been done 12 years before when the Dominion facility was first permitted. You talked about Mountaineer lying. Dominion lied left, well, I shouldn't use that word. Dominion, I'm trying to be polite. Dominion included erroneous information in its permit application. That made the facility's emissions look much less harmful and made it much more difficult for local residents to identify what the threats were to their health. Another point, the compressed time frame for Dominion, for the public to make comments before final regulatory approval did not allow residents time to conduct an in-depth examination of existing laws and regulations and in order to counter Dominion's misstatements. These misstatements included everything from the number of houses nearby. They basically stated it was 10% of what the actual number of residences were. And they also lied when it came to the number of components that were going to potentially leak volatile organic compounds. They initially said that it was 15,000 components. Then, towards the end of the regulatory process, just as Dominion was beginning to do construction, they said, oh, sorry, it's not 15,000, it's 162,300 components that could potentially leak volatile organic compounds.
We miscalculated.
And yeah, we miscalculated. We didn't think we had to count those components. Each of those factors would have been a major consideration in a regulatory review of their proposal. Finally, what bothered me as much as anything is that the fear and anger that residents down in our area had about Dominion's threats to their health and safety from liquefaction were deflected by a well-meaning but poorly informed another environmental organization that came in and confused residents by getting them to focus on fracking. Now you have to understand, Maryland was considering fracking in the far northwest corner, the most northwest corner of the state. We are in the far southeast corner, and the people in our area said, fracking? Why do I care about fracking? They didn't understand the connection between And that confusion really caused a lot of them to fall away and say, hey, I ain't got no dog in this fight. Why should I be fighting Dominion or anybody else that wants to do fracking in Northwest Maryland? So that what happened is that we have a community who's been disheartened, and they are no longer inclined to fight Dominion. By the time the local community figured out what was happening, the regulators, and we're talking about EPA, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Maryland Department of the Environment, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and all completed their reviews and blessed Dominion's operation. By that time, it was done. And the completion of that regulatory process in the beginning of construction meant that a huge new hurdle had been erected to fighting Dominion in its operations. The hurdle is political. Once you get political officials to approve permits, it's awfully hard to get them to say, oh, gee, folks, I'm sorry I goofed. Your health is in danger. I should have caught that earlier. They're not going to say that. It's economic. By the time Dominion got its permits, signed contracts, began construction, it was, they had a very strong argument that they were going to incur significant losses. And that also meant that they were going to have a much stronger legal case as we were going to be fighting them. Now, I don't want to end on that negative note, because I truly believe that there is an option for all of us who are faced with regulatory processes that are completed, permits that have been issued that we think shouldn't have been issued in the first place. Given that Dominion's operations will routinely emit spikes in harmful pollution, the only recourse that we see for ourselves now in Southern Maryland is for residents to conduct pollution monitoring programs that will document pollution levels, that would enable local residents to demonstrate hardcore that the pollution levels now represent a threat to the health and well-being of local residents. And this is the one positive note that I would like to end on, and that's that just because the permitting process has been completed doesn't mean we should give up. And I got the impression, Jennifer, that you were going in this direction anyway. But you have to be able to come up with facts to give to your lawyers to say, this is where we are. You can't be sloppy in the collection of data. You have to make sure you get the right instruments. I have my guru here, Dr. Anna Rule, who is very knowledgeable in that area and has been able to guide a lot of us who are trying to do this. But you have to come up with credible data if you're going to conduct an effective fight. It can be won. It's harder, but it's doable in the end. And so those are my comments. Those are my thoughts on Dominion Cove Point, and you can convert that to Mountaineer Pipeline if you want to, but we're all in the same boat.
Same song and dance, different city.
Same song and dance, and yes. So, thank you.
Ditto. I'm Ruth Alice White with the Maryland Sierra Club, but I started out 11 years ago with Howard County Climate Action, a local group that's soon affiliated with statewide groups to learn more about climate change and its impact on us and what we could do. And in the process, I've heard so many stories that I want to talk about, just a raft of things across Maryland that are impacting us with gas infrastructure, and getting people to understand the harms of frack gas infrastructure, as well as other industry and development on communities, and getting the public to say health is more important than unregulated, unplanned and unregulated development. That human health and well-being of communities is more important. That is like a key issue, and it is not clear in our society that the society values people over profit. It is not clear. And we see it everywhere in each of these issues. So there's so many commonalities between what we're fighting and how we go across. But letting the public know that, what you were saying is letting the public know that how they may be impacted you. They did not see that the fracking in Pennsylvania and West Virginia and all around us was going to send frack gas in pipelines through our states down to Cove Point. They did not see the significance of that Cove Point would not exist if we didn't have a glut in this country of frack gas and a huge desire for those developers to make their last dollar out of it before the wells run dry, which they will, or stopped because we only have 10 years to stop climate change. We can't keep extracting the last thing and make any progress toward renewables, the progress that we need. So people didn't see that, but those of us that have been studying this for a while saw it. How we get the word out to impacted communities is really hard. And now, you know, we won a fracking ban in Maryland, partly by hard work and partly by luck in 2017. It was all political. We now have a Republican governor who wanted, he saw the writing on the wall, he saw that this would probably go through the legislature, so he decided to sign the bill banning fracking in 2017. And now he's talking about running for president as a moderate Republican. During the fracking, during Cove Point, I was at a hearing where mothers, some of whom I met, some of whom have moved out of Cove Point because of fear for their families, were testifying about the impact that gas facility would have on their community, and Governor O'Malley fell asleep during the hearing.
And he had blocked a similar proposal in Baltimore
Right.
because it was going to be bad for the people living there.
When he was mayor of Baltimore.
When he was mayor of Baltimore.
Yeah, he blocked a development of a major gas development at Sparrows Point in Baltimore, but then when he was governor, he approved it for Maryland because there's a lot of money. And our own Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, was over in Asia trying to sell them on importing our frack gas. So at the time, there were 21 LNG export facilities proposed for the United States, and Cove Point was only, I think, the second or second maybe. Now they're popping up again because there's all this frack gas that they need to get their money for. They can't get the price they want right now, so they've got to have uses for it. And the Rockwool factory was one. I'm horrified to hear that they're also burning coal. It's a double whammy. We in this area trying to get coal closed down. The Beyond Coal campaign, and my problem with that as a gas activist is that they're going to move from coal to burning, and we don't like to call it some of us who are activists don't like to call it natural gas, it's fracked gas. Most of it in this area is from the Marcellus Shale and is fracked. So I'll just go over briefly. We have, I just got the time, we have 20 minutes left, or a little bit less. These are things that I, as just a, I retired from working for the federal government and wanted to make a difference, go back to the activism I had been involved in before I got married and had a child, and then had a career, and then was a single parent, and life. But I wanted to go back to the activism I was involved in the when I was in my 20s. So over 10 years, 11 years, I've been on the edges of a lot of fights. One of my good friends is in Western Maryland and has been fighting the accident gas storage facility, which all of these gas facilities leak VOCs, causing local air pollution, also causing a risk of explosion. So it's the same story for each one of these. But
she has worked with her, so in, for almost 6 months, from October 2015 to February 2016, you may have read in the newspaper, the Aliso Canyon gas storage in California leaked. Could not be stopped, leaking methane for a long, long time. A major cause of air pollution.
Can I add a footnote on that?
Yeah,
And you're gonna find I'm really against regulators, efficiency, and effectiveness. That Aliso Canyon leak was occurring over months and months and months
Right.
and months. It was not detected. It wasn't until it became really extreme that all of a sudden they say, oh, we have a problem with methane.
so then they discovered that there's similar gas storage facilities around, and the accident one is in Maryland. Very old equipment, and my friend, Annie Bristow, who couldn't be here today, she was scheduled to be on this panel, well, she could have been on this panel. It's a long story. She coordinated with her local health department. Now, these gas storage facilities, all these compressor stations, have to vent periodically because otherwise they could explode. So it's regular maintenance for venting. Also, sometimes it's an emergency venting because the pressure gets too high, they hadn't anticipated it. But when it's regularly scheduled, the local community, where you have people that have asthma like me, or health problems, other health problems, older people, young people, like my grandson, they would like to know about the venting in order to stay inside or visit their aunt in the next county or whatever. So the local health department is now, in the past year, given public notice 3 times about venting, but they've done it, gotten the facility to give public notice, but they've done it minutes, just shortly before the venting occurred, so it doesn't help anybody. And she also worked with emergency preparedness people and they actually went in and took a tour of the plant and were sort of snowed by the plant people saying, oh, we have plans, but we can't show you everything because this is a secure area. But anyway, that's an issue of Cove Point. It's an issue at each of these places. What is the place of emergency preparedness around these facilities? So that's that. There's the Myersville compressor station, another friend of ours, and now had her whole town of Myersville fight putting a compressor station in the center of town, close to a public school, has all these issues. The town passed denying a permit needed to build the plant, and Dominion Power sued the town. The plant was built. So their people organized, they even got the town city council to pass to pass something, and they were sued by the company and overruled.
Unanimously passed.
Yes. Last year, I'm skipping time a little bit, but time frames, this was just last year, our Hogan administration here in Maryland negotiated with the Canadian AltaGas company and allowed it to acquire Washington Gas, which is one of the local power companies. And this settlement encourages the promotion of gas infrastructure throughout this area. Then in 2018, we got involved in the Sierra Club and all the groups in Maryland in fighting the Potomac Pipeline, which was a small little pipeline going through the C&O Canal area in western Maryland, a historic area. Iconic area, a national park area. We wanted Maryland to deny this, but we also wanted them to do a 401 water certification review, which is a way that some states, New York State has denied pipelines, and other states. So we worked with the administrative people. We asked for this 401 review, and the Hogan administration chose not to do that review, but to let the pipeline go ahead. And it would have taken gas from the frack gas fields in Pennsylvania through Maryland to the Rockwool plant in West Virginia. And they said they needed it for that plant. Actually, since then, since that isn't happening, they found other ways to get energy for the plant. So, you know, lies. But we went to the Maryland Board of Public Works, which is something very few states have. We have this institution in Maryland, which has 2 Democrats and the governor on it. Well, we have a Democratic legislature, and the Democratic legislature chooses one of the members of this board. And the board decided to deny the pipeline. So this was a win for us, and this was a sort of administrative and political thing. We got to the 2 Democrats on the board, the state controller and the treasurer, the state treasurer, who is nominated by the state-controlled legislature. At the last minute, the governor decided to vote with the majority, so he came out looking like the good guy. But anyway, that pipeline is on hold, so that was a win. But it was a workaround. People had to go behind the scenes and get these Democrats to take a stand on something that was of no benefit to Maryland, no monetary benefit at all, and would have impacted the C&O Canal going through Maryland. You didn't mention the Charles County Compressor Station, which is also down in your area, Lynn, but they also had a recent victory. They wanted to build a compressor station to get gas to Cove Point. More gas to Cove Point. And one of our friends there organized the community. They came out in mass and fought for years and hired their own lawyer. And they didn't, as you told me recently, Linda, I think that there's truth to that. We have 10 minutes left. I'll try to finish up.
You're going to ask questions?
I know. I'll try to finish up. There is a women's group at Mount Vernon that is concerned that when you're out at Mount Vernon seeing George Washington's home, that it looks like it looked in the 1700s. And they were concerned about the view shed, that if you looked across the river to where this compressor station would be, you'd see smokestacks. So they got involved in opposing it. And it really wasn't nixed until they got involved. So, you know, it's like the community wasn't that important, but the view shed from Mount Vernon was critical.
Can I make a point in that regard? One of the speakers at this morning's presentation said, if you're going to be active, you have to go to the right people who are making the right decisions. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care who is going to work with me. If they're going to work with me, I'm going to take it as a win. So the Charles County Compressor Station lost out because of the Mount Vernon group. In Southern Maryland, one of the things that we're looking to is we have a particularly active, well-informed public health officer in St. Mary's County. And we have a higher level of childhood asthma, we have a higher level of COPD, we have a higher level of lung cancer, and we have a higher level of cardiopulmonary problems relating to air pollution. This woman is very interested in getting an air monitoring program going. She would be a natural ally in dealing with this. So
Right.
That's the only point I want to make. Look for all the allies you can find.
You have county officials that are allies, but that is another thing. It's the county. These things have to be fought at the national level, at the state level, but at the county level, people do not realize that your county officials and the county boards are so important, and this is where we're losing when we have,
Not all county commissioners and county boards are for you.
But that's what I'm saying.
Because it's all about the money.
They're mostly not.
And they don't
That's
care
one way
about
or the other.
communities.
That's what I'm
Some, very few, will work for you. There's a lot that don't care. They don't
Yes.
call you in for the meetings. They don't present it like they're supposed to have the communities come in, sit down, talk about it.
They
It's
rubber
all
stamp this
about
stuff.
the money.
They rubber stamp this stuff, and that's what I'm saying. It's local democracy. We have, a lot of these places have more conservative county councils, and they just ramrod this stuff through. And
Vote them out.
you
Vote
don't,
'em out.
you don't have a choice. I just wanted to mention two more things. Our most recent fight is they're trying to convert a closed coal burning power plant in northern Baltimore to a fracked gas plant, and we just submitted comments on that. But the process of I really have almost, I mean, the Sierra Club, one of the lawyers is trying to come up with something about legalities, about reconsidering this, but mostly, I went to, they mentioned in the plenary we were in, and it's going to be discussed later on today in several workshops. So a lot of these things are coming up again and again, and the two of you at either end and you, Anna, are going to be leading other workshops also. So there are a lot of these themes that are coming up over and over again today. But I went to a meeting in the Brandywine area where there are 3 power plants already and 2 more were proposed. Basically public service commission people came to talk about how things get approved, how you would get a new power plant approved at the local level. And what they said is because we have deregulation of energy in Maryland, if somebody wants to build a power plant and there are 3 in the community already, but the land is cheap, so you're talking about more low-income communities. If they buy the land and say, I have the land and I can get the fuel to make this plant work and it's economically feasible, and if the state departments come through and say, we approve the air quality, we approve the monitoring, then they automatically approve it. And the state will come through like they did at Cove Point and say, okay, this is an impact area for air pollution already, but if you buy credits, so you're reducing air pollution, out in the west, in the mountains, then you can still do it because there's no cumulative impacts. And we have tried for years to get a cumulative impacts bill passed through the Maryland legislature and didn't.
Can we have,
yeah, so sorry.
can we let anybody,
Yeah,
ask a
comments from
question?
the audience.
I have a question for
Yeah.
Jennifer. I have several. Who's the owner of the apple orchard?
Well, it was Ronnie Sloanacre. He sold it to Rockwool. So temporarily until Rockwool is constructed, Rockwool will own it. As soon as it's constructed, then it goes into the pilot agreement, the payment in lieu of taxes. Then the county will own it for 10 years if they hang around that long because they can leave before the pilot agreement's up. That would be nice.
So they didn't have a meeting or anything?
We didn't know
for the-
anything.
Okay.
Nothing.
Now, you said something about Rockville being, I saw it on the map, then the school is like across the road or whatever, and I'm a former school teacher, so I can imagine what these kids are gonna go through. There's no type of escape plan for the kids?
No.
The road
No,
goes.
Our
whatsoever?
county has no,
That's crazy.
nothing.
That's crazy.
You'd have to go to that main road.
Yeah.
You'd have to go to that main road, which goes right
While
along.
the construction is going on, these.
The kids are in school while they're doing all this water work out in front of them.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so
School
fire
has
department,
sinkholes around it too.
fire department. You have volunteers
Oh, the fire department just got $30,000 from Rockwool. So
to
they're-
do what?
Just to have.
Just a donation.
Blood money.
So are the
Yeah.
men trained to?
No, as a matter of fact, they're not
Takes
really,
all account-
because there was a small diesel fuel accident that happened on a railroad. They had to call Loudoun County to come, hazmat to come handle it. So nobody, even Jefferson County could even handle it. They had to call another county in another state.
So
to
your
come handle
county
it.
is a ticking time bomb.
It is,
Yeah.
it is.
Yes, it is.
Is there any relationship to the Appalachian Storage Hub from your area?
It's farther away, but that is a whole other issue and a
Yes,
problem.
I wanted to mention that also.
Yeah, yeah.
In order to,
You have a question.
Yeah, so Jennifer, remind us, there was a lawsuit from the school. So the only thing that they were maybe hopeful that could maybe
Yeah,
stop the
they
Rockwool.
tried to say that they wanted to use that Rockwool's property for resource education center for behavioral disability children, a regional resource. The problem with that is the Board of Education signed the pilot agreement initially, then come back later and say, oh, no, we wanted your property. The judge wouldn't accept it, although they tried to say,
2 minutes.
they brought in the World Health Organization fact, if you can't build a school, still didn't win, but the judge, we think, has some conflict of interest.
Yeah.
We found out she worked for the same council that every other attorney comes out of West Virginia, and that's the same one that we're in a problem with. And then there's other connections, because everybody's got these connections.
I'd like to make a final comment, and that's that in the next presentation in the Nanacoke room, I've got a presentation on the inadequacies of regulations in limiting pollution from natural gas industries. I don't know what y'all are interested in otherwise, but you might find that presentation of interest, particularly as you're trying to develop a strategy for coming up with opposition to these facilities.
And also, like, really quickly, just to let everybody know, I think everybody in this room knows about the community of communities that was formed maybe 3 years ago by the Maryland
It's on hold now.
Environmental Health Network. It's a little bit on hold, but we're trying to revive it because what affects one community affects all communities.
Yes.
Even
Right,
if it's a compressor station, if it's a holding station, if it's a fracking, if it's, no matter what the
This is a Maryland,
the
this is a
life of the
Maryland-wide
gas
group.
is, but it has to extend because
They
it
work
doesn't just
together, it's
affect
gotta come
Maryland.
from somewhere.
It's going to affect
Southern
West
Pennsylvania
Virginia,
is
it's
the
going to-
problem, that's where the fracking's coming
It's
from right
going to
now.
affect Pennsylvania, North
Right.
Carolina, so we have to get together and we're.
I think that is the way that we're gonna do this.
There's one other thing that everybody, I think, needs to keep in mind and just missed today is there was a meeting last week relative to a $2 trillion infrastructure bill out of the president's office with Democrats and Republicans. And a lot of us don't know what infrastructure means. They think it's highways, right, only. I'm just saying that's a lot of tax, all this tax money now. And what is gonna branch out of that tax money is corporate dollars, right? So, and health impact, so I think there's a bigger piece of this that out of this discussion of a small group of people need to be concerned about getting their fingers and eyes and hands and access to the people who are gonna be involved in developing that infrastructure.
Omega, could you email a link to something about that we could include in this Google Doc we have? Because that's an important thing for people to continue to track. We're out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.